Okay, so this is going to be an intro to a 2D platformer. We're going to set everything up from scratch, and we'll be able to create our little characters inside of Photoshop and drag them in. We'll do things like box colliders and rigid bodies, and maybe getting input from the keyboard and moving things around, and also looking at collisions between items. So this is probably going to be over the course of, I don't know, 3 or 4 videos. I'm going to try to break them up this time as opposed to making one gigantic long one. So yeah, that's what this is. This one's going to be. So we're going to go in here. We're going to create a new project, and I will call this 2D platformer fall 2015. And then make sure this thing here is actually a button. It's not, it looks kind of like, I don't know what it is, but yeah, click on it, make sure it's a button, and then we'll just hit create project. So we're going to make sure we have the default set for 2D. If you don't click that, you can sort of make it work once you get inside the GUI, but it's easier just to set all the defaults for 2D. So here's our wonderful game. We have our camera, and if we run it, we are going to get this beautiful blue screen. And we're going to add some elements to this. Like I said, a platformer, and then maybe a couple of characters we can move around. And we're going to do that. We'll create everything in Photoshop. I just wanted to show you the process of bringing things in here. So I'm going to go over to Photoshop, and let's do a new, let me move this thing over here. Got 2 monitors, so things are showing up on different screens. We're just going to make this thing 100 by 100 pixels. And it'll be this little box. And what I want to do is we're going to have a platform that's black. We'll be able to kind of scale this thing once we get it into Unity. We'll have a character that's red and a goal that'll be blue. And so we'll create all those things right now, all those different colors inside here. And if you're not familiar with Photoshop, it's pretty simple to use. Down here is the color you're going to paint with. We need a black one, so I'll click on that. And we can come down here, we'll say we want black, and then we will use our bucket fill and fill it in there. Now we have a black square. And so we're going to save that. We got to save it as a copy and save it as a PNG. Oops. And where we're going to save it is actually in the directory where we created our project. Mine happens to be up here. This is where I created my project here, and we want to put it inside the assets folder. So yours is probably going to be somewhere different. Who knows where you created it, but anyways, we'll just call this black.png. And we wanted to have a few different colors. It's going to ask you some ping options, just hit none, and then that'll save it. And we also want to have a blue, so with our color picker here, we will click on blue. Okay, and we will bucket fill again to make this thing blue and say File, Save As, Copy, Ping, and we'll call it blue. And we'll do one more. We've already got red here, so we can switch this thing around. And with the bucket fill, we'll make it red and say Save As, Copy G, and we'll say red. And now we've got all of our wonderful graphics that we're going to use to create this game. And so if we click back to Unity, now in our assets folder down here, we've got our black, our blue, and our red squares, which is pretty cool. We've already imported them in there for us. So make sure if you didn't save them inside of, when you're in Photoshop, if you didn't save them into your assets folder, go find them in your Explorer or in your Finder if you're on a Mac and drag them in here. That way they'll get all imported correctly. And if you didn't click 2D at the beginning when it said, set defaults for, you're going to run into a problem pretty soon, because if you select one of your images down here in the bottom, over here it's going to say texture type under the inspector, and if you set your defaults for 3D, it's going to come in as a texture, and none of this stuff is going to work. So make sure it says Sprite 2D and UI. And if your thing up here says texture, I would exit out of Unity and start a whole new, or just not exit out, but start a whole new project and make sure you set your defaults to 2D. That way, when everything imports, let's just revert. That way, when everything imports, it's going to be imported for 2D, and you won't have to worry about any kind of problems that you're going to run into. So that's a quick check to make sure that your defaults are set in the right place. The other place is up here. You can see I'm clicking from a 2D view to a 3D view. That's something else that'll be kind of messed up a little bit too if you did not click the 2D defaults when you came in. But let's assume everybody's got 2D default set up. Here's our main camera, and in our camera preview window over here, it's this awful, horrid blue color, and I encourage everybody to never use this blue color because it drives me crazy. We're going to do something just slightly better than the awful blue color, and I'm going to switch it to white. So I just clicked over here, and it came with my color picture, or color picker, and I'm just going to make it white. So it's just as bad. Plain backgrounds kind of annoy me for most games. But anyways, for this one, we're just going to make it white, and that'll be okay. I'm going to just save this thing right now. Let's do a save project and a save scene, and we will just call this level 1. Just so we've got it saved. All right. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to try and draw like some rectangles here for our character to fall on, and I will do that by just dragging this black into our scene. And if we look at our camera preview, now we see that there is this black square. And that's what we want our character to stand on. I'm going to click on it and scale it. So now I can just drag it out like this to make it look like a platform that somebody can stand on. And I'm able to do that because up here, I have this thing selected way over on the right. If you've got one of these other things selected, you will not be able to just click and drag like I was doing. So make sure your correct edit mode, I guess, or tool. I don't know what you call these things, but the correct one is selected. That way you can move things around and scale things. And then now, if we go over to our game tab, we've got this beautiful platform here. I'm going to just move it down a little bit. Oops, I won't do that. Make sure you have your object that you want to move selected, and then we will scale it still some more. This just so we fill up our whole view. And if we run, now we've got this beautiful black platform. Right. So let's add in our character. Let's just say we will control this red guy. So now we have this red square. This is going to be the guy that we're actually going to drive around and use the arrow keys, maybe a space bar, make him jump and that sort of stuff. So we'll put him in this scene right now, and we click over to game view, and there he is. And remember, you can zoom in or out however you want inside a scene view with the screen with the scroll button. But if you go over to the game tab, that's going to show you what your camera is actually seeing. And you can also do the camera preview by selecting the camera over here on the left. So anyways, let me zoom in on this. So we've got our little guy here, and when we run, there it is. Okay, this isn't overly exciting. We want to be able to have this red thing here fall and make contact with the ground that he's running on. And there's all kinds of crazy ways we could do that. We could sort of analyze in code the pixel values of where this thing is located, and then sort of draw this thing falling down to hit it and make sure that we know how tall this thing is, and when these two things intersect, we would make it stop falling. That gets really complicated, and we don't want to have to do that because that's a whole lot of work. But what we can do is Unity has some really cool stuff built into it that allow us to add physics capabilities so that objects can have weight, they can fall with gravity, they can crash and collide with other objects in the scene, and it makes all that sort of stuff really easy. So we're going to click on our red guy here. This is the guy that we want to control, and we're going to add component, physics 2D, rigid body 2D. Okay, so that's all we did. We just added a physics component. And now if we run, let's see what happens. There it goes. And I'll run again. So we added this rigid body. That gave this thing mass and allows gravity to pull it down. And we didn't write any code yet. It's just the underlying physics engine is handling the, applying gravity and pulling stuff down for us. Now, this isn't overly exciting because it is not, we want to be able to have this thing interact with our platform. And the way we do that is through something called a box collider. So on our little black platform, I'm going to add a component, Physics2D, and box collider. And you notice when I did this, this whole thing kind of turned green. That's the outline of the collision that's going to happen. And I will disable it so you can sort of see that the green is actually there. And that's the box collider right here. So this is telling the physics engine when something else with a box collider kind of crashes into this thing, do some sort of physics calculations to figure out what's supposed to happen. So now if we run, still the same thing, and the reason is because this red thing does not have a box collider on it. It has mass, so it's going to fall, but we did not give it any kind of collision points. So if we just say add component, Physics2D, box collider, and again I did that with our with the red guy selected here. So now this thing has a box collider 2D. We run, and now it'll fall and bounce right on top of our platform, and that's what we want. And it's kind of cool we can do this without any code. Makes it look really nice. And let's see here. And remember, when we're doing this, we're in Physics 2D. If you're making a 3D game, you can just go straight into physics and you will find similar things. But make sure you're doing for Physics 2D and you're adding the box collider 2D to your object. Let's see. So we have this thing here with our box collider. Just to show you how these box colliders work. I have my platform selected, and I'm over here in the inspector, and here is our properties for our box collider, and we have this offset. I'm just going to increase the Y offset by a bunch and run it. And so now our little guy is floating because he's resting right on this box collider that we've defined. So I'm doing this to show the point that when these collisions take place, the collisions are between the box colliders, not necessarily between graphics that you can see. So even though our black platform ends here, the box collider ends way up here, and so that's where the collision takes place. Similarly, we could lower it down like this, and now the box should kind of go, on top of it a little bit. And so yeah, that's how we will do this sort of thing. Trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to put in this video. I think that sort of covers it. What we're going to work on next is adding controls to our character. So instead of him just falling down and resting, we'll be able to move him all over the screen. So I'm going to do that in a separate video. I like chopping these things up. And so yeah, the next video will handle getting some input from the user.